Well, welcome to this video, and I hope you like it. If you do, click the like button, hit subscribe, and share with a friend. Okay. Want to do a little bit of a discussion about permaculture and why it's sort of a double-edged sword. I've said it before, sometimes we're our own worst enemy. Permaculture tends to focus on the concept of what they call a food forest. Meaning basically that you grow the equivalent of a wild environment, but basically you're planting apple trees and then planting maybe some sort of berry bushes in the shade of the apple trees, and then maybe under them, certain vegetables. You're growing more food in a smaller space. You tend to grow things that are perennial, and it's basically an artificial wild environment made up out of primarily domestic food crop type plants. They also tend to like to enrich the soil using nitrogen fixing plants instead of chemical fertilizers. And there's a lot to be said for this approach. I kind of do it myself to some extent, but I wouldn't really call myself a permaculturalist. I do like gardening, and I am into growing native plants from seed. I tend to lean towards growing basically a native forest that primarily has native plants that have edible parts or fruit or some sort of a useful byproduct to a large extent. Things like pawpaw trees or blackberries, gooseberries, blueberries. I've got a bog full of cranberries. I tend to like plants that have that extra benefit of giving me something to eat or make some other use out of. But part of the problem, and a lot of the people seem blind to it, is a lot of the plants they promote, especially as far as nitrogen fixers, are invasive. And that's a bad thing. And one of the mantras is they talk about how permaculture is better because there's all these inherent weaknesses as far as disease, and any one thing can make your crop fail if all you have is a monoculture. But at the same time, they often tend to encourage people to plant things that will go wild and form monocultures in certain areas. Now, around here, locust trees are native, both black locust and honey locust. And those are things that are often touted for the the nitrogen fixing qualities. I've also, strangely mostly out of Australia, seen videos about raising honey locusts for the pods. And honey locust got its name because the pods have a sweet material inside, a sweet pulp inside. I haven't had much luck doing anything with it. The only thing I have found any recipes or uses from one of the Firefox books around here was actually making a liquor with it. It was widely used for feeding livestock and that, but not so much for human food that I've been able to find in my research. But it is perfectly edible, and you'll see these people down in Australia growing these things and just pulling the pods off of the tree and sitting there and scraping up the pulp and eating it with a spoon, and apparently it's pretty good if you catch it at the right stage. However, they are probably going to be a pest problem in Australia, and Australia has had many pest problems down there. Black locust doesn't have the edibility thing going on. I've heard you can eat the blossoms. I can't remember if I've ever tried it. I've eaten a lot of weird things, but you know, they don't produce a whole lot of food, but they're very good at nitrogen fixing, and they will grow in anything. They are, however, very aggressive colonizing plants. The only thing that really kills locust trees, and I tend to call black locust just generically locust because that's what they call them locally around here, but the only thing that really kills them is being overshaded by something taller. They're, you know, even when they're pretty sickly trees, they'll straggle on for a while, and they tend to send up root suckers, and their entire pods, because their pods are kind of small, flat little bean pod looking things. They are related to beans. You know, the wind tends to carry them. They kind of dry up on the tree, and the wind tends to carry them a little bit. And yeah, they'll grow in almost anything. If they weren't native here, they'd probably be considered invasive. I am sure they are probably invasive in other countries. Like I said, they will grow in almost anything. They're native here in a temperate, fairly damp climate, but they will grow in, you know, very hot, arid places. They will grow in a gravel pit. They will grow in railroad ballast. They don't mind baking in the sun. They don't mind being in the worst, rockiest, crappiest soil imaginable. They'll take a good bit of moisture and a good bit of dryness. They'll deal fairly well with both. I've seen them growing in fairly swampy areas, and I've seen them, like I said, basically just growing in shale or gravel and you know, very dry, rocky soils. So that's kind of a problem. And one that I've heard them promoting, even I was watching a video from a guy up in Canada promoting people using Russian olive because it's a nitrogen fixer. Russian olive's an invasive weed. It's listed. I don't even know where he's getting it because most places around here, it's gotten to the point where you can't buy them. They've been banned in most states. You know, I'm sure they're great in their native environment in Eurasia. There's the Russian olive and the autumn olive. They're closely related. They look a lot alike. They've got sort of a silvery underside to their small leaves. They got tiny little berries. They don't taste bad. They got sweet berries, but they're basically like a little pit with some skin over it. There's not much meat to them. But birds eat them, and everywhere they poop, these things come up. And they'll form these huge, dense monocultures. And, you know, these invasive plants, they create monocultures, and they erase the local biodiversity. That's part of the problem with them. And I'm just amazed that the permaculture people don't see that. You know, just in general, it would be better to figure out what's native to your area, plant what's native to your area that suits your uses. And, you know, like around here, often it's hard to find out what the Indians did, because the Indians, you know, they just got so, I don't know what to even call it. Just they got screwed over, and just their culture and everything just descended into chaos and legend, and you find bits and scraps of stuff, but I mean, a lot of the tribes moved so much under the force of arms that you know, they don't have any continuity of their traditional uses of things, because they got moved somewhere else where different things grow, basically. So a lot more stuff is known from what the early settlers around here did, which they probably got all those ideas from the Indians before they, you know, ran them all off to places like Oklahoma, you know, hundreds and hundreds of miles away. So, you know, a lot of times you got to look at certain historical documents and that, which, you know, sometimes are hard to interpret to figure out what the exact uses for various things were. So, but still, there's probably, no matter where you live in the world, you know, if you want to grow something for fruit, there are native things that will provide edible fruit. You want greens, you will find things that are good for providing greens. You want something that provides grain or seeds or something. There's going to be a native plant that will probably do that. And if not, the next tier would be look at things with consideration of how invasive it is. And also, just for like the soil enrichment, there's going to be native things that are good nitrogen fixers where you live. Try to use what's native to where you are. You know, don't look at somebody's concept of something they did in England for what you should do in the United States or Australia or South America or someplace else, you know, in a totally different climate and a totally different habitat, and try to force things in. That's part of the reason why you get these problems with invasive plants. They might be fine in one place, they're not going to work in another place. You can't use these cookie cutter one size fits all things. It just doesn't work well like that. Yeah, just like I said, the next tier down would be, you know, look at you know, available plants that have a track record of not being invasive or spreading, and you know, that would be, you know, particular to your region. What's invasive one place may not be invasive someplace else. There are things that we grow here on the East Coast that are invasive as hell on the West Coast, but they're not a problem here, and vice versa. You know, and that's just within the realm of the United States. And even within the realm of the United States, you know, if you're really looking for something that's native, you know, black locust is native here. You know, 100%. Pre-Columbian times, black locust grew here. Black locust isn't native to California. You know, native has nothing to do with geographical boundaries. It's about, you know, where you're at and what habitat you're in, what, you know, geographical region you're in, things like that. Just what historically was where you are in particular. You know, a lot of people just don't understand that. I've been trying to put together something more like a hierarchy of what is native or how native something is. And, you know, I've got a basic concept, but fleshing out the details have just been driving me crazy. When I get it figured out, I plan on doing a video on that. I've actually thought of doing that as a paper and publishing it. You know, the basis, at least in the United States, would be by county. But when you start getting into soils and microclimates and all these other things, that's where it kind of goes haywire. The basic concept I'll go ahead and put out there is just, you know, how native something is, you know, geographically depends on, is it native to your county or not? And if it's native one county away, it's better than something that's native 5 counties away. And if something's never been recorded in your county, but it's been found in all the counties around you, and you know, the particular spot you're thinking of planting it has a similar habitat in all major ways to the places where it would have been found in these surrounding counties, well, then it's probably native there too. But like I said, it's fleshing out the details, and a lot of the details, you can start going down the rabbit hole with soil types and you know, sun exposure and, you know, there's so many different variables in there, and trying to quantify them in such a way that makes sense, and in a way that the different categories are weighted in a good way that makes sense is what I'm trying to work out still. So, but at any rate, I'll leave it at that. Just wanted to talk a little bit about the permaculture craze, and like I said, it's a good idea, but it just seems poorly executed because a lot of these people are promoting planting things that are highly invasive for nitrogen fixers, and even some of the domestic plants, they'll be like, oh, this bush here is great, produces these great berries, and it does well in this this forest farm type setup. But yeah, if it's not native to you and it spreads to all the native forest around you, probably not a good idea to plant it. And I find that at least most of the people out there promoting this on YouTube and in social media and stuff like that seem to be they've got this whole thing about biodiversity is better than monoculture, but then they totally miss the mark with the invasive species and only seem to be concerned with what it does for them on their property, and have no concern to what it's doing to their neighbor's property or to the surrounding natural environment at large. It just seems a huge blind spot, and to be honest, a bit hypocritical. So I'm going to leave it with that, and see you on the next one. Well, I hope you found that video informative. Hopefully it made you think, and please click the like button and subscribe if you haven't done that already, and check out the video that should be appearing somewhere around me here, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thanks.